Good morning. And welcome. I'm Gary Hibbs. I am the Executive Director here at Riderwood, and we're pleased to all gather together. We're going to hear about prescription drugs, price gouging, and we have some special guests that are going to brief us on a new law that's been enacted. So I'm pleased to have Vinny DeMarco come up, and he is with the Maryland Citizens Health Initiative, their president. Vinny?
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, very much. Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Riderwood. This is my first time here. It's a beautiful place. Congratulations. And your organization, Riderwood, is, of course, part of Erickson Living. And Erickson Living was one of 50 organizations from around the state, grassroots, people-oriented organizations that endorsed a bill during the 2017 session to, for the first time in the country, ban price gouging by some prescription drug corporations. So thank you, Erickson Living. Thank you, Riderwood, for being on the ground floor. We're here today to launch our new website, healthcareforall.com/hearmystory, where you can go and tell your story about how prescription drug prices may have hurt you. And my colleagues, Matt, Suzanne, and Stephanie, have handed out to you a document where you could write your story. If prescription drug prices have hurt you or your family members, tell us your story. And we want to know because we want our Attorney General to know. And this bill passed because of grassroots support and also primarily because it was put in and led the fight by our wonderful Attorney General, Brian Frosh. And Attorney General Frosh is right here with me, and he is also defending this law in court so far very successfully. And I want to introduce Attorney General Frosh to tell you a little bit about what the law does. And it took effect, by the way, on October 1, just a few weeks ago. It's the law of the land now. They used to say that they can raise these prices no matter how much because nobody could do anything about them. Well, there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Brian Frosh.
Thank you, Vinny. And I want to say thank you to each of the individuals up here. Each played an important role in getting this law passed. Senator Brian Feldman, Delegate Ariana Kelly, County Executive Rashern Baker, and Dr. Steve Ruckauer. Thanks to each one of you. Here's what the story is. As I'm sure you know, generic drugs have been one of the few bargains in healthcare for Americans for generations. When a drug gets a patent, the owner of the patent can set prices for 17 years. And when those drugs come off patent, generic manufacturers can enter the market, make the drug, and compete. And when there's robust competition, the price can drop as much as 80%. But in recent years, the prices of generic drugs have started to skyrocket. And it's hard to understand why, but the US Government Accountability Office did a study I think 2 years ago. They looked at 1,400 of the most common generic drugs and found that more than 300 of them had experienced what they called extraordinary price increases. And by extraordinary, they meant increases of more than 100%. The US Senate Committee on Aging looked at a narrower band of generic drugs that were 30, 40, 60 years old. And they found price increases that range from 2,000%, 3,000%, 5,000%. And these are drugs for which all of the research and development was done by somebody else years ago, decades ago. And they have just managed to corner the market in some way that allows these extraordinary price increases. So we set out this past legislative session to stop price gouging. And we together worked on legislation that says that if a drug has an unconscionable increase in price, unconscionable means it shocks the conscience, then unless it can be explained by the costs of production or by the costs of marketing, the Attorney General may go into court and enjoin the drug company from jacking up prices to an unconscionable level. you will not be surprised to learn that the drug industry, the pharmaceutical industry, was very much opposed to this. They make, apparently, when you can raise the price by 5,000%, you can make a huge profit. So they fought us tooth and nail, and we were able ultimately to get the measure passed, both the House and the Senate. We've been joined by Senator Susan Lee, who was a champion of it in the Senate. Brian Feldman in the Senate Finance Committee led the charge, was the floor leader and a great champion of this legislation. The bill went into effect on October 1st, and just before it did, the pharmaceutical industry sued us and said that this measure is unconstitutional. Well, a couple of weeks ago, the district court judge gave his ruling and said, nope, looks okay to me, I'm not going to enjoin the enforcement of this effort, and dismissed about half of their case. And in an unusual move, they appealed directly to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and that's where the case is pending. I want to, just in closing, tell you cite one story, one drug. It's a drug called Daraprim. And Daraprim is used to treat toxoplasmosis and AIDS. And if you need Daraprim, you really need it. You can die if you don't get it. And the CEO of the company that makes Daraprim had come from the hedge fund business. He bought the company with, I think, one of his hedge funds, and shifted to being the CEO of a drug company. You may have heard his name. It's Martin Shkreli. He was the guy who was convicted of securities fraud about a month or two ago. And Mr. Shkreli, when he took over Turing Pharmaceuticals, jacked up the price of Daraprim, which is a 63-year-old drug, by 5,000%. He raised the price from $13.50 per pill to $750 a pill. He was testifying before Congress about this, and some enterprising congressman said to him, "Why did you raise the price from $13 to $750? And he said, "Because I can." And our answer to him is, no, you can't, not in Maryland. So that's what this bill is about, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you and with these great advocates. County Executive Baker was right there in the beginning of this fight, and I think Vinny will introduce the folks who are coming next. But thank you very much for being here, and thanks for your attention.
Let's hear for our wonderful Attorney General, the very best in the nation. And I want to just summarize for you the case that the drug corporations are making to the courts. They're saying to the courts of the federal courts, please let us price gouge. That summarizes their case. And Attorney General Frosch is saying no, not in Maryland. And we are wholly confident that the Attorney General will succeed in keeping this law in place. As the Attorney General said, one of our key leaders in getting the law passed was County Executive Rashern Baker, who was out there at the beginning making this happen. And he's a terrific public health advocate. I've had the pleasure of working with him for decades on many public health issues. And he gave a very powerful message, which we're going to ask him to give here. In addition, his county and Montgomery County are getting out the message to people in this area to go to healthcareforall.com/hearmystory and tell your story. So it's with great pleasure, I want to introduce one of my all-time heroes, County Executive Rashern Baker.
Thank you, Vinny. It's good to be in Prince George's County. Good to be in Riderwood. Thank you for coming out this morning. This is a very important issue. I first want to thank Vinny DeMarco for his hard work on bringing this issue and other health-related issues to us. He's done a great job over the years. Certainly, Senator Feldman and Senator Lee and Delegate Kelly, I want to thank you for your hard work in getting this passed. I mean, we wouldn't be here without the legislative body actually passing it out and get it into law. And what can I say about our Attorney General? We were blessed. This is why I endorsed the Attorney General early, because I knew he'd be the fighter not only on issues around our health care, but the environment and other issues, and holding, quite honestly, the federal government accountable. But on this issue, we're leading the nation, and it's because we have somebody who really cares and fights hard and does a great job. Can we give him another round of applause, please? You know, so I mean, it's personal for me. I also want to thank, you know, the people from my staff who worked very hard to keep us abreast of this issue and keep us in front in Annapolis. And one of those individuals who I think is going to do great things in the future in Prince George's County is here and worked on this. I want to thank Calvin Hawkins, who my special assistant, and made sure I got down there. What I said, and I wanted to make sure I testified on this issue before the legislative body. You know, everyone, you know, a lot of people know that my wife was diagnosed with early onset dementia. She was 48 years old when she was first diagnosed. There's no cure. There's only medicine to make the quality of life better. She has seizures, and so she's on 2 medicines to regulate the seizure. The medicine she's on is medicine for life. She's 57 years old. She will never be off that medicine. And I noticed from the time I started buying the medicine when she was 48 to when I came in one day, and many of you may have gone through this, or you know people who have, where you get to the pharmacy and for whatever reason there's a mix-up in the insurance and it's not ready, or they won't pay for it. And so at this point, since it's seizure medicine, and I'm guaranteed if she doesn't have it, she'll have a seizure, I'll be back in the emergency room, and we'll be back in another hospital stay. So I said, I can't wait for you to get permission from the from the insurance company. I need to buy it now. And they said, well, you're gonna have to pay generic now, mind you, full price. I said, I don't care, I need it. A drug that costs me full price generically $100 when we started out, or less than $100, was $300. That's how much it had gone up. So you think about the fact that I have some of the best insurance in the world as county executive. I have access to some of the best doctors. I have a health officer there. I have resources. But what happens to somebody who comes in there and says, I can't afford $300? What makes a drug that's already out there on the market go up that much? And that's why this is so important, because it affects us at the place where we're seeing the greatest increase. When I went to go pick up her medicine yesterday, just to close it out, you know, with my insurance, I picked up the 4 medicines she's on. Mind you, once again, it's on for life, doesn't change. And at the end of it, I looked at the copay for these medicines. It was $100. That is something I pay every month as a copay. So when people ask, why is this so important? It's important because when people come in, the market goes up anyway on its own. That's outrageous. And when you get a player in the market that gouges like this and takes advantage of the fact that people have no other choice, that is unconscionable. That's what Vinny and the Attorney General mean. And that's why it's important. And that's why these men and women who serve in Annapolis, who actually help pass this, are so important to people like me and my family. Thank you.
That was a beautiful story, Mr. County Executive, and that's the story the County Executive told to the legislature. And they heard him, and one of the people who heard him was Senator Brian Feldman, on the Finance Committee's chair of the Health Subcommittee. And as Attorney General Frosch said, no one did more to get this bill enacted than Senator Feldman. He fought for it within committee and did a brilliant job of fending off bad amendments and getting it passed on the Senate floor. He is a tremendous public health leader, and our state can be really proud that he's there, and I'm proud to introduce Senator Brian Feldman.
Well, thank you. I learned something every day, so we're somehow, I guess, I thought I was still in Montgomery County, and I understand, I don't know if we have an official ruling, so part of Riderwood is, okay. I just wanted to clarify this. But just by way of a little context, Vinny mentioned that I chair the Health Subcommittee in the State Senate, and we got a lot of attention. The subject of health care, I don't have to tell anybody in this room, is maybe the hottest subject in our nation. And we in Maryland have tried to be very out front in terms of responding whatever's happening or not happening on Capitol Hill. Generally, not much is happening on Capitol Hill. And so this year, one of the hot issues was Obamacare and repeal and replace. And there was a lot of press in Annapolis about the fact that we created a commission in the state legislature that was designed primarily to respond in quick fashion to anything that would happen again in Congress to repeal, replace the Affordable Care Act, whether it has to do with removing subsidies, reducing the Medicaid expansion, all the rest. In fact, so I want to just make that point because Vinny is on that commission, is a member of the commission with me, so we are focused like a laser beam on healthcare broadly. But at the same time, one of the other hot subject areas that we're here to talk about today was maybe got a little slightly less coverage, had to do with and a huge sort of price driver in terms of healthcare has to do with prescription drug pricing. There were, and Attorney General mentioned there were hearings up on Capitol Hill, and what the Finance Committee up there found and GAO reports found was, literally hundreds of drugs had gone up 500, 1,000% over short periods of time. And that, I think, got the attention of our Attorney General. In fact, we had President Bill Clinton in Maryland yesterday. Many of you may have read this. What was the topic he wanted to talk about? Our opioid addiction crisis in the nation. And what is one of the drugs that's used, maybe the most popular drug to treat that is naloxone. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. 500% increase in the last 2 years in that drug, which is designed to address what is considered a national epidemic, opioid addiction. President Clinton talked about that just yesterday. So our Attorney General came to the legislature, to Senator Lee, myself, Delegate Kelly, who serves on the Health Committee in the House, and said, look, they're not doing anything on Capitol Hill. They can have all their hearings all they want, but they're not actually doing anything. They don't have any tools in the toolbox. The U.S. Department of Justice doesn't have tools under federal law to go. Let's take the lead. Let's take the lead here in Maryland. Let's move forward with a piece of legislation, the first in the nation at the state level, that will allow me to sue drug manufacturers for outrageous, unconscionable, unjustifiable increases for essential drugs. So he came to us, and we got it done. I would make a point that we did have floor fights, et cetera, all over the place. Susan Lee is my seatmate in the state Senate, and the pharmaceutical industry hired every person in the didn't hire, I should qualify that, recruited a lot of people in the legislature to try to water down that bill, et cetera, and Susan was on the phone and we were able to ward that off. The other thing is, even if they had tools at the federal level, with the current administration, it's not likely they were going to use any of those tools. So the Attorney General came to us, and as he pointed out, almost the entire industry was in Annapolis, because this was going to be the first state in the nation to go after that with this kind of a law. So they were camped out outside of my committee, Delegate Kelly's committee. They attempted to water it down. And then we passed it, and not just passed it, we passed it with an overwhelming majority in both our House and the Senate. And even with that, the governor did not choose to sign the bill. I still, to this day, am not quite sure what that was all about. The bill became law without his signature. Just something to think about. It passed. The industry was not going to be done yet, okay? Then they go the litigation route, and they file lawsuits, and as the Attorney General mentioned, that has not gone anywhere to date, but they're going to continue with appeals, et cetera. But they're not done yet. In the next session, in fact, Vinny, Attorney General, myself were just talking about, they already have a new bill that they plan to put in to water down the bill that we're talking about. So the fight continues, but the genie's out of the bottle, if you will. And so because of Maryland's first in the nation law, Now, multiple other states have bills modeled after our law and are going forward, and they're going further. Now that the issues out there nationally on the table, they're looking at other areas, other issues, and Vinny has some ideas about transparency. California just passed a major piece of legislation saying that if you want to increase prices above a certain percentage, you're going to have to disclose and justify and explain it. So states are moving all over the place, but we were out front first. Back on the price gouging law, I don't want to go on too much longer, but it does require collaboration. It requires our Attorney General, the legislature, people at the local level, and that's why I'm very pleased that Montgomery County and County Executive Leggett can be here today, is joining with Prince George's. As I understand it, we're going to attempt to highlight this new law prohibiting price gouging by drug manufacturers. We're going to post on our website, and I think Prince George is going to do the same, redirecting a lot of our folks to this particular healthcareforall.com/hearmystory site, which is going to allow folks to actually literally weigh in with their stories, how they've been impacted. It's going to help the Attorney General to do his job, and it's also going to lay, I think, a foundation for us to move forward into some other pieces of legislation that attack this issue. So let me just close by saying that I think we're going to work together at the state and local level. Again, I don't think much is going to happen at the federal level, but I think it's really, Maryland, I think, is uniquely positioned to take the lead nationally in this space, and I'm glad we got off to a great start with this first in the nation price gouging law led by Attorney General Frosch, but everybody up here had their part. So thank you. I think I went on a little bit too long, Vinny, but my first time to Riderwood, and I wanted to take full advantage because, it's just...
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Let's have a big hand for Senator Brian Feldman. He truly is a great public health leader in Maryland. But there are two houses, the Maryland General Assembly, and it had to go through Senator Feldman's committee and through the House Health and Government Operations Committee. And we were thrilled that Delegate Ariana Kelly was there fighting for us the whole way. And it wasn't easy because the prescription drug corporations fought very hard. Even when they realized the bill was going to pass, they fought very hard to weaken it. But Delegate Kelly said no, and as she has on many public health issues, she stood up for you and for all of us in Maryland. So I'm very pleased to introduce Delegate Kelly.
Hi, so thank you for having me here today. I have to tell you, I do serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, and I serve on what is called the Facilities and Pharmaceuticals Subcommittee, where we really got down to the nitty-gritty of fighting for this legislation. I also chair the Health Occupations and Long-Term Care Subcommittee, so I have a special interest, particularly in the needs of our seniors. But most importantly, I am here today at Riderwood because my 4 grandparents resided here. You may have known them, Doris and Dick Kelly and Frank and Maureen Brannigan, and they loved this community. And so I'm very happy to be here today and looking at all of these faces and really standing up to celebrate this amazing piece of legislation that we were able to pass. I want to congratulate our Attorney General, Brian Frosch, for his tremendous leadership on this. This is a really important piece of legislation, and it is going to help real live Marylanders. But the most important way that we can make sure that it works is by making sure to collect stories from consumers who feel like they may have been victimized by price gouging. We need information. As legislators, one of the ways we were able to fight to make sure that this legislation remained strong was to hear the stories of individuals and repeat them by talking about the people who were really not able to afford their medication, the medication that they needed because the prices were increasing out of control. So we need your help in order to make sure that this legislation works. I want to thank the Attorney General for enforcing it. I want to thank my legislative colleagues and County Executive Baker for sharing his important story to my committee. But also I want to ask everybody out there, if you feel like you've been a victim of price gouging, please do go to the website healthcareforall.com/hearmystory. That's healthcareforall.com/hearmystory. Because we really do need to hear those stories in order to make sure that this law works and to make sure that we can stop those unconscionable price increases. We need to hear from people in Maryland. So thank you for being willing to share your stories. It's It's really unfortunate that this is the process we have to go through to make sure to protect consumers in Maryland, but I am so grateful that we have leaders like these who are willing to make sure that it happens. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Delegate Kelly. And let me just emphasize, healthcareforall.com/hearmystory people can go there and in English and Spanish tell your stories. It's very, very important. I recognize in the audience our lobbyists, Len Lucci and Eddie Pounds, who did such a great job battling this. And as Senator Feldman said, on the floor of the Senate, he needed help. They were trying to weaken it. It passed by overwhelming majorities, but before it passed, they tried to weaken it. And we're thrilled that Montgomery County sent us Senator Susan Lee, another great public health advocate who fought hard and helped us succeed in defeating those efforts. Delegate Senator Lee.
Thank you so much. I'm Senator Susan Lee, and I am glad that so many of you are here to hear what we did in the legislature. But you know, with all that uncertainty in Washington, D.C., particularly with the President Trump's recent erratic behavior, we don't need to go into that, and the inability of Congress to pass anything meaningful, we in Maryland stood up. We stood up for you and all Marylanders, because when they have price gouging, it can mean the difference between life or death for many individuals. As Vinnie had said, as Senator Feldman and Attorney General Brian Frosh, but these are real champions. Our Attorney General Brian Frosh is a real champion for all Marylanders. He came to us and asked us to do this bill, and we need your help too to enforce this law. And also wonderful Senator Brian Feldman, who was the lead sponsor of this bill, but also did a great job as a floor leader. I was sitting right next to him, and I can tell you it was very stressful, but we were, although he looked really cool. He's always cool. He never, he's like a poker player, never shows his hand, but he did an excellent job. He was ready, and he's a great champion of the people too. And Delegate Ariana Kelly, who did a great job on the House side defending this bill. And of course, our wonderful Vinnie DeMarco, who spearheaded this whole effort and brought together different stakeholders to help pass this bill. And of course, Rashun Baker, thank you so much for being there, because we couldn't have done it without you. And our wonderful MedChi president, Dr. Stephen Rockauer. Some of you might know him. He was there almost every day fighting for this bill. So we had a great team here. But let me tell you, please share your stories on that website, because we need, as legislators, to have a record to show that this is definitely an important issue, and to have real people share their stories is very important for us to be able to keep this law. And we need it for us, Attorney General Brian Frosh to be able to enforce this law. Because right now, as I said, it's before the Fourth Circuit Court, and it's very critical that this law not get overturned. So I thank you so much for being here to hear us, and please help us, and thank you so much for inviting us here today.
Thank you, Senator Susan Lee is there whenever the public needs her. And we're going to close up with Dr. Stephen Rockauer, because in addition to people you see here, there was a broad coalition, the NAACP, AARP, and many other groups, including the State Medical Society, who, as Senator Lee said, they were there all the time making this happen. So, Dr. Rockauer, in his white suit.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Steve Rockauer. I'm a physician in Montgomery County, and I'm also the past president of MedChi, the Maryland State Medical Society. And I don't know from laws. I don't take care of legislation and stuff. I take care of patients. And my job is to make sure that patients get better. When patients are not taking their medicines because they can't afford them, I can't do my job. So having laws such as this that everybody's been talking about to keep the prices of medications lower is vitally important. On your sheets is one of the drugs for gout. This drug has been around for perhaps 500 or 1,000 years. When I was in medical school 1,000 years ago, it was of generic even then. And now it's gone, the price has gone up as a generic 500,000%. It's just absolutely unconscionable. So we're here for this law to give Attorney General Frosch the right to keep the prices down, and for everybody to go to healthcareforall.com/hearmystory.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. I have a great hand for this panel and a great hand for Riderwood. Thank you for hosting us. Gary, come on up here. We want you to be in all these pictures. I didn't know you had escaped. Make sure you take pictures with Gary in it. Thank you, Riderwood. The message is clear. This law makes sense, and as Senator Feldman said, states all across the country are going to replicate it. It's going to be all across the country soon, we hope. But here in Maryland, we need you to go to healthcareforall.com/hearmystory. And at this point, we can answer questions. Yes?
Is this law going to bring the prices down on the drugs that have already gone up so high?
That's an interesting question. We think it will keep drug prices stable. It's not clear that the legislation gives us the authority to go back and enjoin price increases that occurred before it became effective. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's not clear. It will certainly deter drug companies from jacking up prices more, and whether it can be applied to price increases for Daraprim and gout medicine and stuff that have occurred in the past, it remains to be seen.
I have two questions. So will it stabilize just in the state of Maryland, or are you expecting a chilling effect across the country? And if just in Maryland, are you all anticipating that there will be people from DC, Virginia, and all across the country in Maryland to buy the drugs?
I can't say that I can predict for certain, but I would expect it would have a soothing effect across the country. It will certainly protect Marylanders from outrageous price increases.
Could you also talk about the blog? My understanding is that there was a fight to get this blog up. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that?
You mean healthcareforall.com/hearmystory?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, healthcareforall.com has been around since 1999. Our website's been there. You can go to the website to see what we're doing. But when this law passed, we thought it was necessary to have a place for victims to go and tell their stories. And that's why we created healthcareforall.com/hearmystory, where people can tell us if prices have gone up astronomically and hurt their families, and we will let the Attorney General know if we get stories, and he will decide whether it's appropriate for a lawsuit. But if it's not appropriate for a lawsuit, we can use that information to go to the legislature, ask for additional legislation. As Delegate Kelly said, the legislature thinks hard about effect on individuals. And as Senator Feldman said, we are going to think about going back next session to try to expand what we accomplished this session to maybe deal with the brand name drugs which aren't affected by this law. So this healthcareforall.com/hearmystory website is for two purposes. One is to provide information to the Attorney General that he may be able to use in potential lawsuits. And second, to gather stories to see what else we need to do to protect all of us from prescription drug price increases. Other questions? Yes, yes.
So are
There you go. Thank you, sir.
So are the pharmacies involved in this, and how are they involved? Because I believe we lost CVS. TRICARE pulled out of CVS, Neighbor Care here, because the prices were not competitive. So that TRICARE, the military one, now recommends its clients to do Walmart and Walgreens because of the pricing. And like Walmart, you can get drugs for like $4 for 30 days and $10 for 90 days. So I'm wondering how the pharmaceutical stores are interacting with this legislation.
Well, the law only applies to manufacturers. The law only applies to manufacturers. They can't price gouge. That's all the law applies to. Yes, sir.
I'll just name one of these because I can pronounce it. The albuterol sulfate, up 4,000% plus. What's to prevent the manufacturer from saying, okay, I won't sell it in Maryland?
Well, I'm going to ask the Attorney General to chime in on this, or maybe Senator Feldman. They did make those threats. I don't believe they would ever do that. I don't believe they would ever do that. And in fact, it's interesting, in the lawsuit, they were saying how difficult that would be. They themselves were saying that. It'd be very difficult, and I think something they would never do. Attorney General Frost?
Yeah, that is the simple answer. I don't believe them. They threatened it. I don't believe it'll happen. Look, albuterol sulfate has been around since I was a kid, and that was a long time ago. But the price has gone up by thousands of %. They make money if they sell it at half of what it is today, of a quarter of what it is today. They don't lose money by selling it at just 1,000% increase. So I think it would be them cutting off their noses to spite their faces. We're calling their bluff, and we'll see if they deliver on those threats.
Can I just add, I do want to add one thing, because we heard those threats on a multitude of drugs. And in some cases, the same exact drug was being sold in Canada by the same manufacturer for 10% of what they were selling. So, and they were apparently making money on like 1/10 of the cost. So I hear you, I understand it, but I think, as the Attorney General pointed out, I think we can call that bluff, because we can see how that same drug is sold all over the world, including right over the border, and they wouldn't be selling it unless they weren't making some money. So I think it's straightforward. That's it.
Let's one more and no more. Okay. Thank you all very, very much, and thanks, Attorney General, legislators, county executive, and Metcalf. Thank you.